City Planning and Zoning Commission public hearing. A few things to start out with for tonight's proceedings. Everyone from the public entering the hearing virtually has been automatically muted and cannot speak. As the item you're interested in comes up for discussion, you will be called upon and unmuted. There's a chat function in Zoom. However, this is not part of the record and should only be used if technical difficulties arise. Our procedures for public hearing begins with a presentation from the planning team. Then we'll go to the applicant and then the representative of the Registered Neighborhood Association, followed by questions from the commission. After that, we proceed to public testimony, starting with those who are in person, then who signed up on the sign-up sheet in advance, and then anyone else who raises their hand virtually. If you are attending through your telephone, you can type in *9 to raise your hand. Each member of the public is allowed up to 3 minutes for testimony. We are strict with this time as it is limited in code. Finally, the applicant is allowed 5 minutes for rebuttal, after which the hearing will be closed and the commission will deliberate and render a decision. Mr. Chair, you have the floor.
Thanks, Crystal. Good evening. We are citizen volunteers appointed by the mayor and approved by the city council. We make final decisions on conditional use permits, variances and appeals, and recommendations to the city council on subdivisions, rezones, annexations, and code or comprehensive plan amendments. Any decision made tonight may be appealed to the city council, provided that the appeal is filed within 10 days of this hearing. In order to file an appeal, you must have given written or oral testimony at tonight's meeting. That's why it's important to give your name and address when you testify tonight. We utilize a consent agenda. This means that if the applicant agrees with the staff report and if there is no public opposition, the item will be placed on the consent agenda. All items that are placed on the consent agenda are approved with one motion without further public comment. For items not on the consent agenda, we will hold a full public hearing in the order just detailed a few minutes ago with staff, applicant, neighborhood association, and then public testimony. Thank you all for attending tonight. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Stead. Schaefer.
Here.
Squires. Blanchard.
Here.
Moore. Here. Gillespie. Benbrock. Danley.
Here.
Mooney.
Here.
5 present, 4 absent.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we have a pretty short agenda tonight, and it looks like we have one item that's eligible for consent, so we'll start there. That item is item number 4, CUP 22-66, Pivot North Architecture. The address is 300 East Jefferson Street. This is a conditional use permit for a height exception associated with an existing medical office on 1.14 acres in R3D zone. And I see the applicants present. Are you all in agreement with the terms and conditions of the staff report? Yes. Okay, very good. Let the record show that the applicant is in agreement with the staff report. And is there anyone in attendance tonight hoping to testify in opposition to this item? Okay, very good. We'll go ahead and place item 4 on consent. And I think that will do it for our consent agenda tonight. So at this point, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Danley.
make a motion that the consent agenda with item number 4, CUP 22-66, a conditional use permit for a height exception located at 300 East Jefferson Street, be approved with the terms and conditions in the staff report.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion to approve the consent agenda. Motion by Commissioner Danley with a second by Commissioner Moore. Any further discussion? Okay, very good. Will the clerk please call the roll then?
Schaefer.
Aye.
Blanchard.
Aye.
Moore. Aye. Danley.
Aye.
Mooney.
Aye.
All in favor. Motion carries.
Okay, great. Thanks, guys. All right, we'll go ahead and return back to the top of our agenda with item number 1. This is SOS 23-2. The applicant is Alex John Argon. Project address is 1843 South Regent Avenue. This is a waiver. Item before us here is a waiver to the subdivision ordinance for multiple access points on a double fronted lot on 0.41 acres in an R1B zone. First, we're going to hear from staff, Jesse Lyle.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, the item before you is SOS 23-2, a request to waive the subdivision ordinance requirement to maintain two access points on a double fronted lot located at 1843 South Regent Avenue in an R1B zone. The subject parcel contains an existing single-family home with vehicular access points on both Regent Avenue and 5 Mile Road. The applicant applied for an accessory dwelling unit in 2022 that was approved with a condition to close the secondary access point onto 5 Mile, as the subdivision ordinance states that lots with double frontage shall be limited to one street access on one frontage by a plat note. Note 3 on the plat of the Countryman Estates subdivision number 3 states that there is restricted access on the 5 Mile Road unless primary access is specifically approved by ACHD. While ACHD did review the ADU, correspondence confirms that they do not set standards or conditions for uses that generate less than 10 trips per day and did not require this access point to be closed at this time. Additional correspondence with ACHD also confirms that the overall policy concerning access management is to prohibit direct access onto arterials and to require properties to take access from the lower classified road if a property has frontage on one or more street. The subject property has primary access point onto Regent Avenue, which is classified as a local roadway. And the city's policy is also to restrict direct access onto arterial roadways in order to reduce potential conflicts between vehicles, bicycles, and pedestrians. This issue of safety and conflict points is conflated by the existing 6-foot-tall privacy fence that does not accommodate a clear vision triangle to allow vehicles to safely enter the roadway while being able to see oncoming pedestrian, bike, and vehicular traffic. The Development Code allows for the Planning and Zoning Commission to issue a waiver of the subdivision requirements under specific conditions. However, there are no exceptional circumstances or topographical constraints that would meet the standards for a waiver. And the safety concerns with allowing the existing access to remain as is do not promote the public welfare and interest of the city. In conclusion, the planning team recommends denial of the waiver, and I will be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thanks, Jesse. Next, we'll hear from the applicant. Yeah, please come on up here to the podium. You can start with your name and address, please.
My name is Alex Argon, address 1843 South Regent Avenue. And then how much time do I have? Just a couple minutes?
10 minutes.
10 minutes?
typically.
Okay, perfect. Cool. Yeah, you'll have to forgive my nerves. I'm not used to speaking in front of a large group. So thank you in advance for that. But yeah, I just prepared a little presentation. I bought this property in 2021 because I had an existing shop that I saw potential to convert to living quarters, just like the neighbors 2 houses down. As a young man with 5 small children, I thought this would be a great investment for my kids as they get older and need a place to hang out in their teenage years. All of this was envisioned because the property has a direct access from 5 Mile. This was also a huge selling point for the property. Seeing multiple properties with access from 5 Mile Road, I never assumed keeping the access would be an issue to be discussed. I believe it is crucial to the property to keep the access and would like to discuss why, starting with, I'm just going to go through point by point, kind of what the planning team had, but it says restricted access, no lots in the subdivision shall be provided with a primary access to South 5 Mile Road, unless said primary access is specifically approved by the Ada County Highway District. While the Ada County Highway District did review the ADU, correspondence confirms they do not set standards or conditions for use that generate less than 10 trips per day and did not require this access point to be closed in their form letter. The argument here is that my property doesn't generate more than 10 trips per day, so ACHD doesn't have jurisdiction over this, but I would ask which of the multiple properties with double access do generate more than 10 trips per day? How can ACHD not set the standards and conditions when they are the ones who put the access point in? The subdivision requirement clearly specifies if I have specific approval from ACHD, which I do, I can have access from 5 Mile. There should be no dispute on this matter. Existing fence that obstructs the clear vision triangle. The existing privacy fence causes a lack of visibility triangle. I agree with that. However, I propose to remove privacy fence and replace with a smaller see-through fence, something of a wrought iron nature. Replace the gate with a wrought iron fence as well, only about 3 feet tall. There are also 6-foot-tall arborvitaes that will be removed as well to ensure maximum visibility. There are many properties along 5 Mile that take their primary access from that road. Keeping my access, which has an automatic gate, will be just as safe, if not safer, than the homes that are directly on 5 Mile Road. The street Sutherland connecting Regent to 5 Mile, which is my primary access to my house, has much less of visibility due to my neighbor's trees blocking the road. I would argue that my proposed plan has more visibility than the current conditions on that connecting road. There is also a large street light that provides clear visibility at night. Hardly any of the houses on 5 Mile have a street light to help with visibility and aren't near as safe as mine. The development code does not allow for parking in the rear yard setback, which is 30 feet in the RB1B zone. The existing structure is 30 feet from the property line. The parking area is actually 45 feet from the property line. Essentially, I'll be able to park my truck deep in my backyard for work and repairs. There's currently a fence in the way, but it will be removed to make the parking 45 feet from the property line. The original subdivision plat contains a note restricting access from 5 Mile, and there is no record of when this curb cut was made. That's from the city. It is not my problem or my mistake if the city doesn't have record of the curb cut. And it's not only my curb cut that has the cutout, it is on 8 different properties. Are they implying that someone other than ACHD put the access in, that an unauthorized person made major modifications to over 8 property sidewalks on a major road without ACHD's approval? They would have been shut down immediately. Then who could it have been? The only logical answer is that ACHD put the curb cut in when they widened the road and didn't keep proper record. Once again, that is not my fault to remedy. I spoke with my neighbor and the previous owner of the property to confirm this. The letter reads as follows. To whom it may concern, I was the owner of this residence, 1843 South Regent, from July 21st, 1995 to June 21st, 2021. One of the main reasons we purchased this property was the fact that it had a his and her backyard. The his backyard had access off a 5 Mile road through a 20-foot gate, which allowed me to park my car trailers, boats, and other equipment without damaging or modifying her backyard. In approximately 1997, ACHD widened 5 Mile to 5 lanes. At that time, ACHD granted me a curb cut for my gate so I could have continued access to my backyard. In 2008, I decided to build a shop. I went to the city of Boise to obtain permits. They required me to drop a plot plan. The plan showed the orientation of the building and the proposed driveway using the 20-foot gate off a 5 Mile road for access. On the original plot plan, it showed a 25-foot setback from 5 Mile to the building. The only change Boise City required was to make the setback 30 feet. I was granted permits and completed the project in the summer of 2021. The city claims no record, but my letter from the previous owner and testimony from neighbors confirm ACHD clearly put the access point in. Although the subdivision states double fronted lots are prohibited, my property and several others have had it since 1997 with no issues. If it wasn't an issue in 2021 when the shop was finalized, it shouldn't be an issue now. Section 11(9-51) of the Development Code allows the Planning and Zoning Commission to issue a waiver of the subdivision requirements, provided the property is of such unusual size or shape or is surrounded by such developments or has unusual conditions that the strict application of these regulations would result in substantial hardship or inequity. In addition, a waiver may be granted so that the applicant may develop the property in a reasonable manner. My property does have an unusual condition in that it has an existing access point that doesn't meet the subdivision standards, although it has met the standards since 1997 with no issue from the city or subdivision. The definition of inequity is a lack of fairness or justice. How can my existing access be stripped away and my neighbor 2 houses down keep theirs with the exact same use and function? How is that fair and just to me? How is a man to make sense of that? What is more of a reasonable development of my property? To hire a crew to cone off traffic, break up existing concrete, obtain permits, pour new concrete in place of the old, or to simply keep ACHD's original work from 1997? I'm not asking to make modifications to a major road. All I'm asking is to keep the work that was already done. While there are other properties with access directly on a 5 Mile road, the applicant's request to increase the intensity of the current use by converting the existing shop into an additional unit facilitates the need for the property to meet the development code. Any other property in this situation would have the same requirements. I believe this to be misleading and inaccurate. The existing shop used to have 2 large garage doors leading out to 5 Mile. The original plan approved by the city was a large driveway leading directly from the shop to 5 Mile. There were roughly 6 to 8 vehicles on the property as well. The clear use was to have numerous cars coming in and out of the access point. All of this was seen by inspectors and was not addressed. I would also note that the previous owner finalized his shop in September of 2021 with everything I just described. I started my project in April of 2022. The access point was never mentioned or brought up to him by the city, meaning that his original use with the large garage doors was perfectly fine with the city and subdivision in 2021. If the city claims it doesn't meet the current code, I would ask what code changed during the 6-month gap between projects. Had the city flagged the access point when they finalized the existing shop in 2021, it would have brought up a legal issue for me and the previous owner, as the direct access from 5 Mile was a huge selling point to the property. I have removed these large garage doors and would argue that I have decreased the intensity of the original use and have made it safer than its original approved use. In conclusion, I have specific approval from ACHD, which clearly meets the subdivision requirements to have double access. The ADU application clearly states that double access is prohibited unless multiple entrances are already in existence. Mine is already in existence. I feel I've given more than enough sound logic and reason to justify leaving the access the way it is. The project report is recommended of denial of my request for the subdivision ordinance waiver. All those reasons aside, I truly feel that denial of the waiver and closing the 5 Mile access would be a severe iniquity, injustice, and hardship forced upon myself. Thank you for your time. Do I sit down?
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Argon. Okay. First we'll check, now we'll check in to see if someone from the neighborhood association is present. That's the Southwest Ada County Alliance. Okay, it doesn't look like they're with us. So we'll go ahead then and open this up for any questions by the commission to either the applicant or to staff.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Blanchard.
Jesse, this is not exactly our wheelhouse. However, I show on the ACHD capital improvement plan for, well, let me just cut it short, that at 5 miles going to 5 lanes in very short period of time. Is that our understanding as well at the city here?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, if that's what ACHD has on their capital improvements plan, I would assume that they would be going forward with that.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Mooney.
Steph, question for Steph. Jesse, the 5 miles classified as a major arterial or minor arterial?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, I believe it is a minor arterial at this point.
Okay. A question for the applicant.
Please, John.
Mr. Argon, I had a question
Would
for
you
you.
mind
Yeah.
coming back up, Mr. Argon? Thank you.
So you mentioned, Mr. Argon, you mentioned the previous project and the previous owner had some garage. It was a shop and there was only a 6-month gap between his project and your ADU project. Could you elaborate on that just slightly?
Yeah, so I bought the house from a gentleman named Butch Gale. He had started the project in 2008, and through one reason or another, he hadn't finalized it until 2021 when I purchased the home from him. So it was classified at that point as just like a garage in his backyard, a very large garage, I would add. And so he had 2 very large, I think a 16x7 and a 9x7 garage door on the front side leading out to 5 Mile. And then what I've done is I've closed that all off now on my design of it. It's more of a dwelling than it is a garage at this point.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Question for staff then. So Mr. Argon's question about the previous project and this project, can you elaborate on that some more?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, so while that project was started in 2008, I can't speak to that approval. I was, not with the city at that point in time. And so it never had received its final inspection. That's why it was finalized in 2021 from the plans from 2008. And with this conversion into a dwelling unit, it has to meet the subdivision code. This would be for any ADU. We've had people who've had to do driveway improvements, install sidewalk, just various improvements to meet the subdivision standards.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Moore.
So on our packet page 28, it's got the history of previous actions. There's the rezone and then the ADU application, but there's nothing in between that. Did this garage not need any sort of planning approvals?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, it was probably just in as a building permit and just didn't have to go through any specific planning approvals as long as it met the setbacks.
Understood. And then, Mr. Chair. So with that, and that's the reason they were able to use the curb cut then, because as long as it meets the building setbacks, so be it. Is that the correct understanding?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, again, I can't speak to when that curb cut was put into place. I'm assuming it's for when ACHD widened that road as the applicant has stated. However, because that building was not intended to be a dwelling unit at the time that it was built, it did not need specific planning approval because it met all the setbacks.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Daly.
a couple questions, one for staff and one for the applicant. First for staff. So I think there's a difference here between what ACHD is saying and how it's being interpreted, but I want to make sure I understand that. From the letters and correspondence, I read it that ACHD essentially is taking a non-stance, not that they are approving it.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, that was my understanding, is that ACHD did not review this specific curb cut during the ADU process. Since then, they have just provided their policies and not really taken a stance either way if they're supportive or not.
Because it's fewer than 10 trips, the typical.
That's correct.
Okay. So to the applicant, if I can have you come back up. First of all, thanks for coming out. I know it's nerve wracking. I apologize for that, but So I want to make sure I'm clear on this point. So reading in our packet here, the applicant applied for an accessory dwelling unit in 2022. That's you, right? That was approved with a condition to close the secondary access point onto 5 Mile Road.
Mhm.
So you applied, that condition was in the condition of approval,
Mhm.
and you accepted that,
Mhm.
which if that was in that document, then you agreed to it,
Mhm.
right?
Yes.
So if you agreed that there would be no, I guess that's where I'm trying to understand your
Yeah,
point.
can I
And
explain?
there's a lot of good stuff that you said, but it was a lot of what you said. So I'm trying to just
Yeah, no,
make
I
sure I get
understand.
it.
Can I?
Yeah, please go
Yeah.
ahead. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
so when I did the planning, the everything, my intention was to just kind of, at least my understanding, and maybe I misinterpreted that, but I got a letter from planning development, and it kind of showed the breakdown of everything that I would have to do on the property, the contingency to close 5 Mile Road before the occupancy certificate was issued to me. And at the time I thought, okay, that's perfectly reasonable. I guess I'll just kind of make do. And as I kept on accessing the property, that time I'd only lived at that house for about maybe like 6 months. I didn't really know the neighbors. And as I kind of started talking to the neighbors and then seeing, neighbor had 2 houses down from me, has a large structure with the same access point, I started thinking like, well, I wonder if this is like maybe a technicality and I can maybe state my case farther down the road. So yes, I agree that I accepted at that time, but as the project continued, I was like, actually, I wonder if it would be worth it to go back before I do another permit, break up concrete. It's a lot of work to do what's
Mhm.
described there. So that's kind of where I'm coming from there.
Thank you for your candidness. I appreciate it.
Jesse, a couple of questions for you. So as the city's standpoint, if we were to uphold the denial, does the city, what are the next steps for the applicant? Does he have to gate off, like fence off that access? Does he have to remove all of the flat work? In the city's perspective, what is the next step if we were to deny the access to 5 Mile?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, in order to get the occupancy for the ADU, you'd have to comply with that condition, which is to close that curb cut.
Okay. Close the curb cut, meaning fence it or remove the curb cut?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, that'd be remove the curb cut and repair the sidewalk.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Mooney.
question for staff then. Do we have any leeway to not require that repair of the curb cut and still deny the subdivision ordinance waiver?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, I believe that you can modify conditions or if you want to approve this, but if you deny it, then I believe that it would uphold the conditions for the original ADU approval.
So just to piggyback Commissioner Schaefer's question then, so the applicant is going to be required to repair that sidewalk and curb cut. Is that true?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, apparently you can modify the waiver to continue to deny it, but have an alternate way to close that access point.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Danley.
I know I recognize this question may not have an answer because it's an ACHD question, but maybe there's an input that would be valuable here. If in fact, what Commissioner Blanchard said is correct, that 5 Mile is currently 3 lanes in this section. I'm shaking your head. It is 5 lanes. Okay, that makes a difference. So you're saying that the 5 Mile section, that's kind of what I thought. All right, then that takes that question off the dais. Never mind.
Jesse, this is, I think, somewhat immaterial, I think, but I'm going to ask the question anyway. The neighboring properties that have these similar situations, are you familiar with the use of those facilities that face or that take access from 5 Mile?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, I am not familiar with the specifics on all of these. I can assume that some of them are used for vehicle access or shops, as this property was. And if any of them were to convert any of these shops to ADUs, as this applicant did, it would be the same condition.
Okay, very good. Okay, so then to the city's knowledge at this point, these other properties, these aren't currently ADUs on these other properties that are taking access off of 5 Mile.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, not to my knowledge.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other questions? Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. All right, we'll go ahead and open this up for any public testimony on this item. If you'd like to testify on this item, the podium is free and come on up here if you're in person, or if you're online, go ahead and raise your hand and we'll call on folks online. Okay, no takers. So Mr. Argon, at this point in the hearing, the applicant is typically given 5 minutes to rebut anything that comes up in testimony. Now, public testimony hasn't happened. You can certainly yield the time for rebuttal, or if you'd like to do a quick rebuttal, that's certainly up to you as well.
Yeah, I would just further state, so, I'm going through the proper channels. I think, this property, when I bought it, had the rough end for electrical, for sewer, for gas, for water, all these things already done to it. And so I think it was clear that at some point there would be some sort of bathroom, or the original use was you were going to have some sort of high traffic coming in and out of there. So all my intention is just to keep it the way it is. I've spent a lot of money on the project. And so to cut off the curb is just another added expense that seems highly unnecessary. Like I said, if you go down 5 Mile, there's about 8 properties with this exact same curb cutout. And so I feel like it should be grandfathered in, especially seeing that the previous owner's project was finalized in 2021 and my project is starting up in 2022. I think that little gap right there I don't think any city code had changed in that time that would require me to close my access point. So I think that's all I would have to say. Unless
Okay.
there's any questions.
Nope, we're good with questions. Thank you. Okay, we'll go ahead then and bring this item back before the commission to render a decision. Again, this is SOS 23-2.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Mooney.
I move that we deny the waiver to the subdivision ordinance for multiple access points SOS 23-2 for all the reasons stated in the staff report, with an additional site-specific condition added where the applicant is not required to modify the curb cut and repair it to original condition.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Blanchard. You got a second from Commissioner Blanchard. Commissioner Mooney, you want to start with some discussion?
Mr. Chair, I agree with the staff on the multiple access points, and I commend the applicant for the ADU and going the extra effort to make this work. Unfortunately, when you get into the subdivision ordinance and the dwellings, then obviously the light of the code gets shined on you harder. And so we've got to look at this carefully. And I agree that the extra access on the 5 Mile, which is a major or minor arterial, is an issue for vehicles, safety, bicyclists, pedestrians, all those reasons. But I also don't think you should be penalized for the fact that ACHD put a curb cut in years ago. So for all the reasons in the staff report beyond that, that's why I'm making this motion.
Okay. Any other discussion on the matter?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Danley?
I'll be brief. I'll be supportive of the motion. I think the additional condition makes sense. I don't think we need to add a financial hardship to the applicant. The problem that we face, and it was in the presentation, is that we have to find a hardship, a specific hardship. And while I completely can sympathize with what you're saying, we hear every single week, every single month, ACHD closing down access points on arterials. It's their overarching policy. I recognize that in your instance with the 10 vehicle issue, it gets caught up and it gets gray. I think the big part of the issue here that I see is that it was a condition of approval and you signed off on it. I will add one thing that's a broader picture, and that access to arterials isn't instantly a danger. Boise Avenue is an arterial, and it has front end driveways up and down. Harrison is an arterial. It has driveways obviously up and down. The problem with this one, however, is that 5 Mile is largely comprised of larger subdivisions where the anticipation of driveways is much different than it is in a purely residential front-on situation like a Harrison, Boise, or Vista or other places. So there is a difference here. And I understand staff essentially trying to enforce the overall goal of the code. So I'll be supportive of the motion, but I also want to thank you for your well-written testimony. And again, I know it's not easy.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Moore?
actually not going to be in support of the motion. I think I agree with closing off the access, but I don't agree with the modification. And that's just because I think it potentially creates muddiness in the future if that use were to change or something like that, or somebody were to come back with an application, then there's the discussion about the existing access again. And so I think it does, unfortunately, ACHD for whatever reason put in this access. Now you're left with this use, but I think leaving it in could create muddiness in the future. So I won't be supporting the motion.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay. On that note too, I'm going to check in just with staff real quick too. So John, your motion was to add a condition that says the applicant doesn't have to remove the curb cut. So the thought process being that he just has to take out the gate and fence across the curb cut. Is that the thought process?
That was my intent. Yes.
Okay. So staff, do we feel okay with the condition as it's written, or do we need to kind of go back through that process and amend that condition?
Mr. Chair, I might recommend amending that to be specific in how we want to close it.
Okay. Okay. Very good. Okay. We'll circle back on that. Just real quick, I'm going to sound off. I will be supporting the motion. Mr. Argon, I understand where you're coming from. I appreciate your thought and your honesty here tonight. For one reason or another, these curb cuts on 5 Mile are actually counter to the subdivision plat. They're also counter to city code. So I find it very difficult for us. I agree with staff report that I don't see any real means for us to approve this curb cut, especially since you're changing the use from, a garage to an ADU where there's going to be more residents essentially. Right. So unfortunately, I think it's pretty clear that that access has to go away. I am supportive of Commissioner Mooney's motion that you don't necessarily have to remove the pavement, but we will probably need to amend that condition so that we clearly state what you need to do. And again, appreciate your effort and your honesty here tonight with the situation. So we're done. Actually, I'm sorry, we're done with hearing parts. Yeah. So okay. So with that, John, if we can maybe send it back to you, can you maybe propose an amendment to that condition and clarify things?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, my motion is to deny the waiver to the subdivision ordinance for SOS 23-2 with an additional site-specific condition of approval that the applicant is not required to repair the curb or the curb cut, but is required to close access with fencing.
Okay, very good. And then Commissioner Blanchard as the seconder, do you support the amendment?
Yes, I support the amendment.
Okay, very good. Okay, any further discussion? Okay, very good. We'll go ahead then and call the roll. Again, we have motion to deny the waiver with the added condition as stated by Commissioner Mooney with a second by Commissioner Blanchard.
Schaefer,
Aye.
Blanchard,
Aye.
Moore,
No.
Stanley,
Aye.
Mooney,
Aye.
4 in favor, 1 opposed, motion carries.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Aram. Yeah. Thank you, staff. Okay. We'll keep on moving to the clock's wrong. I looked at the wall. I looked at the clock on the wall. It's like we're ahead of time. We're ahead of schedule. Move on to item number 2. This is CUP 23-3 Looking Glass Hair Design at 1070 North Cole Road. It's a conditional use permit for personal services over 1,000 square feet on 0.05 acres in an LOD zone. And we're going to hear from Jesse Lyle again from staff.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. The item before you, CUP 23-3. It's a conditional use permit for personal services over 1,000 square feet located at 1070 Cole Road on 0.5 acres, 0.05 acres in an LOD zone. The applicant plans to open a hair salon with only interior modifications proposed. There are other personal service businesses in the office complex, and there's a condition to approval to provide required bike parking on site. One public comment was received concerning parking, and the applicant is able to provide the 5 required parking spaces adjacent to the building, and they have plans for employee parking away from the entrance. And in conclusion, the planning team recommends approval, and I will stand for any questions.
Okay, thanks, Jesse. Next, we'll hear from the applicant. You can start with your name and address for the record, please. Then you'll have 10 minutes.
Pete Kilpatrick, and the address is 1070 North Cole Road. So addressing the comment on parking, parking was our biggest concern that we had before signing a lease on this building last year. We've been in negotiations on other buildings for salons in the past, and it seems like parking's what made the projects fall through. So I will say there was a lot of communication ahead of time on this one before we had a comfort level of committing to this building. So the first was communication with the HOA. They pointed out that the stylists would need to park in the overflow parking lot that they have that's located just behind the tennis association's office. I have slides. Slides 1 through, that's me, I'm driving. So overflow parking lot sign. There are 5 spots on the north side that look like they may need to be repainted, but following back to the larger section of parking. So in total, the overflow parking back here, there's roughly 20 spots for overflow parking. So there are also multiple paths from the overflow parking that puts you out just to the front side of the tennis association's building, which is just east of us in the same parking lot. So almost a shortcut, if you will. So other early communication in this was we met with our neighbors at Envision, which are just to the east of us. Their parking spaces basically link up with ours that are directly out in front of our building. They were willing to give us permission, written permission, to use 3 of their parking stalls. So that's additional parking out there for us. That's Monday through Friday, which is when they are open for business. And additional parking spots beyond that on the weekends, if need be, for client parking. So my wife's been in the cosmetology industry for over 18 years. She's worked in a few different salons, all of those being lease station salons, which is what we are. The stylists basically just, they set their own hours according to what they've got for appointments, right? So it's not often that all the stylists will be working at the same hours on any given day, meaning the need for 14 total parking spots in that parking lot, slim to none. But we also have a backup plan. We've talked to some of the committed stylists that we have. There is non-posted or unposted street parking off of West Priest Drive. That is 1,274 feet from those parking to our parking lot. So the 2 stylists that we have that get their 10,000 steps in each day. They'd be walking 509.6 steps. Doesn't even make a dent in that. Our goal is not to create a fiasco within the complex for parking. That's the last thing that we want to do. So we feel that the solutions that we have in place and the correspondence that took place early on will ensure that we don't create any issues for our neighboring businesses with parking. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Next, we'll check in to see if anyone from the West Boise Neighborhood Association is present. Okay, doesn't look like it. We'll go ahead and open this up for any questions for the applicant or staff.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Mooney.
a question for staff. The applicant in the late correspondence implied that there's this 14 parking spaces requirement, and yet staff reports is pretty clear that there's 5 required spaces. And your explanation seems pretty reasonable. Can you elaborate some more on where this 14 came from and what the code says?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, so our code has a requirement of 1 space per 300 square feet of floor area, pretty typical for any kind of service use. And so that would lead to 5 spaces for this particular size of an operation. The 14, I can assume, came from someone in opposition saying that they have 7 chairs in their building, so 7 stylists and 7 clients.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Jesse, would you mind, is there a way you can show a site plan? Applicant referenced parking adjacent to the tennis center nearby. And I just want to have a clear picture of where that is in relation to the subject property. Thank you.
I don't have a specific site plan for just this area, but the tennis association building is to the west of the subject property. East of the subject property.
Okay. So Mr. Kilpatrick, do you mind maybe coming back up real quick? Just a couple of follow-up questions on this topic. Thank you for your pictures and your presentation. Just wanted to be clear, if you could kind of describe, it sounded like maybe those parking stalls you were referencing are on the south side of the tennis building there. Is that generally correct?
They would be on the east side of the tennis building.
Okay. And are those the 2 larger buildings just immediately east of your subject project?
Yeah, so
Okay.
it's really hard to see.
Just trying to get a little bit of an understanding of, how these arrangements work.
Correct. So subject property in purple on here. It shows ours to the east. There are 3 structures still in purple.
Mhm.
The one to the far south would be the tennis facility.
Okay.
So it's just on the orange side of that are the photos that you saw of the overflow parking.
Okay. Gotcha. And the tennis facility is obviously part of the same homeowners association master agreement for parking.
Yes, it is.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, we'll go ahead then and open up this item for public testimony. If you'd like to testify on this item here in person, the podium's free. If you're online and want to testify on this item, please go ahead and raise your hand. Okay. Oh, we have 1 hand up online, looks like. Mr. Stokes. We good, staff? Okay, Mr. Stokes, if you can go ahead and unmute, we should be able to hear you.
we okay now?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yes. Hello.
Okay. We're the owners of that building and previously occupied it. And from 2017 to 2022. And we often use that overflow parking that Mr. Kilpatrick's referencing for our staff parking without any incident. And in cooperation with Envision, which is the neighbor just east, we were able to manage all the parking spaces on the south side of both buildings. So Mr. Kilpatrick has done his homework, and I don't anticipate them having any problems with parking in front of the building or in the overflow parking.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Stokes. If you wouldn't mind just giving us your name, your full name and your address for the record, please.
Sorry about that. Richard Stokes, 2811 Twilight Street, Caldwell, 83605.
Okay, great. Thanks again.
You're welcome.
Okay, I think that might do it for public testimony on this item. Mr. Kilpatrick, again, this is your opportunity for any rebuttal. You can certainly yield that time if you would like. Okay, let the record show that the applicant has yielded his rebuttal time. We'll go ahead and return this item back before the commission to render a decision.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Danley.
I make a motion that item number 2, CUP 23-03, a conditional use permit for personal services at 1070 North Cole Road be approved with the terms and conditions of the staff report.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion to approve by Commissioner Danley with a second by Commissioner Moore. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Danley.
first and foremost, when I think Looking Glass hair design, Mr. Kirkpatrick, you're exactly the face I anticipated I would see representing such an entity. No, the applicant has clearly done their homework, and I don't see any issue with this whatsoever. Certainly, there's going to be some stylists who, come and go. Not everyone's going to work all the time. So I really don't see any issue with this. And it also sounds like it might be your first business, I think, if maybe sort of official ownership anyway. If it is, good luck, because I think it'll go well. We need more of it. So congratulations.
Okay. Thanks, Mr. Danley. Any other discussion? Okay. All right. I'll be in support of the motion. Yeah, I think it was good. No issues on our side. And just, for full clarity, the city doesn't typically get involved in negotiating private parking agreements. So I agree with Commissioner Danley's statement, though. You obviously did your homework on the property, and we continue. Hopefully it works itself out just fine. And there are no issues with the neighboring property owners. So all the best with the project. Okay. With that, we'll go ahead and call the roll.
Mr. Chair.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I should have jumped in earlier.
Yeah.
Since this is unusual, I wanted to thank Mr. Stokes for chiming in online and supporting this. Thank you, Mr. Stokes.
Okay. All right. Again, we have a motion to approve CUP 23-3. Motion by Commissioner Danley with a second by Commissioner Moore. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Schaefer,
Aye.
Blanchard,
Aye.
Moore,
Aye.
Danley,
Aye.
Mooney,
Aye.
all in favor, motion carries.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Good luck with your project. All right. We're going to go ahead and take a 5-minute break. Up next for us is item number 3. This is CFH 22-93, CAR 22-46, and SUB 22-70. It's called Dane Subdivision. The applicant is Riva Ridge Engineering. The address is 3121 East Starview Drive. Let's see, this is a Category 3 hillside development permit for grading associated with a residential subdivision on 1 acre in a pending R1C zone. A rezone of approximately said 1 acre from A1 open lands to R1C single family residential, and then the associated preliminary and final plat for the residential subdivision comprised of 2 buildable lots on 1 acre. And we're going to hear from staff first. Jesse Lyle again.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, the item before you is CAR 22-46, CFH 22-93, and SUB 22-70. A request to rezone approximately 1 acre from A1 to R1C located at 3121 Starview Drive. Category 3 hillside development permit and a 2-lot subdivision are also included. The subject property is currently undeveloped with single-family homes on all sides. It is located in the foothills planning area within the IR1 and Newey area, and approximately 600 feet north of the Warm Springs and Park Center Community Activity Center. The applicant wishes to rezone approximately 1 acre from A1 to R1C. The property is designated as suburban on the future land use map, with other R1C zoning across Starview to the north. Other zoning designations allowed within the suburban designation are A1, R1A, R1B, LO, and NO. The open land zoning district is intended for parkland and low density residential development. Other residential zoning designations are intended for larger lot development, and the location of the subject property is not suitable for office uses. There's existing R1C zoning across the street, and the proposed R1C zone is the most fitting for the area. The Category 3 Hillside work session was conducted on February 9th, 2023, and the preliminary reports confirm the site can support the proposed development. The proposed grading is limited to essential grading and frontage improvements along Starview Drive. Additional grading review will be required with the construction of each single-family home, and all lots will need to comply with the city's hillside and foothills development standards. The two proposed lots would have access from Starview Drive. There are existing curb and gutter improvements along the north side of Starview Drive, but no improvements along the south side of the street. As the Boulder Heights Estate subdivision continues to develop, there will be sidewalk on the north side of Starview Drive connecting to Warm Spring Avenue. A recommended condition of approval requires the applicant to install curb, gutter, and detached sidewalk with street trees along the frontage of Starview Drive. Public comments have been received in opposition to the request, primarily with the density of the R1C zoning. While the R1C zoning does allow for up to 8 units per acre, the applicant is proposing a 2-lot subdivision. Any proposal that contains more than a single family dwelling would require additional review, and topographical constraints make further development difficult and unlikely. The applicant has also expressed opposition to the condition for detached sidewalks and a landscape buffer with street trees, as there are no sidewalks in the area and trees would block neighbor viewing of the valley. While there are no sidewalks nearby at the moment, there will be sidewalk installed on the north side of Starview connecting to Warm Springs Avenue. And additionally, the development code does not provide any view shed protections. So in conclusion, the planning team recommends approval of the applications, and I will be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thanks, Jesse. Next, we'll hear from the applicant.
I'm the owner, Wyatt Johnson, 5449 North Mendelson, Meridian, Idaho. I put together a brief presentation, mostly to keep me on track. Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, this is something that you're all well aware of, but I thought I would point out that the current city comprehensive plan places a strong emphasis on infill development in order to increase density without increasing the city's footprint. This particular project is exactly what I think is intended by the city's comprehensive plan. As you're aware, but I think maybe for the benefit of those who are not, the choice of the R1C zone was really the only zone that we had available in order to do a 2-lot subdivision. Otherwise, we'd run into spot zoning. And so while I understand that there's a lot of concern and frustration, worry that there would be 8 units on this acreage, it was the only zone that we had available. I'll also note that I think it's going to be, as divided, quite consistent with the remaining existing neighborhood. We will have 2 lots with 120 feet of frontage on Starview, which is the neighboring property to the west has 117 feet of frontage, and the property up to the west of that has somewhat less. So as divided, it will be quite compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. As you're aware, if there are unusual conditions or hardship to avoid strict application of the code, you can make waivers. I am asking for 2 small changes to the proposed conditions of approval. First, it's the requirement for the sidewalk. This is the property looking west. There is no sidewalk to the west of this property that will tie in. There will never be any sidewalk to the west of this property. Looking to the east, we are on the south side of Starview. There will be no sidewalk tying to the east side of this property. The only sidewalk that is proposed for Starview is going to come up the north side. So even with the improved developments on Starview, there's not going to be a tie. So first, I would ask that there be no sidewalk requirement at all. In the alternative, if we must have a sidewalk, which our preference is not, at least don't require it to be a detached sidewalk. The Boulder Heights subdivision, which is up above the old Warm Springs Mesa, has sidewalk, but it's sidewalk that immediately adjoins the curb. And the reason is with their hillside development, it's to minimize the footprint of the roads. And no sidewalk minimizes it even more, but if it must be there, at least do it adjoining. The second condition of approval has to do with, well, and I guess obviously there's no other sidewalk in this portion of the neighborhood on either side. And if you go up into the neighborhood, there's no sidewalk there either. The trees. Right now, the condition of approval would require a category 3 or category 2 tree every 40 feet along Starview's frontage. And what we have right now along this is showing what the neighbors across the street to the north have in terms of a view. They've got, there are some trees that are there on the property down below, but they come up to just above street level. And right now they still have, the neighbors have a view of the front. If I place a category 3 or 2 tree every 40 feet, those trees, if you go through, and I read through the landscape guidelines, those trees grow somewhere between 40 and 80 feet each, depending on the species. Placing those trees along that will destroy whatever view it is that the north neighbors have. I'm planning to build a house here. I want to be a good neighbor. If nothing else, I would like to remove that requirement on those trees along that stretch of Starview so that it doesn't become a barrier to my neighbors and make them hate me. Otherwise, I greatly appreciate staff's recommendation of approval on this project.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Johnson. We might have a few questions for you here in 1 minute. Go ahead and have a seat if you'd like, though. First, we'll check in to see if we have anyone from the Warm Springs Mesa Neighborhood Association present. Check online real quick. Okay, doesn't look like it. So we'll go ahead then and open this up for any questions by the commission to staff or the applicant.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Danley.
quick question of staff. So when I'm looking at the plat map and just looking at the general configuration, what I see is a property line to the property on the west that looks like it would allow sidewalk to be put in should that decision be made. And I know that the decisions in order to make that happen either would come with a change of use or development ADU or something along with that property, or the neighborhood planning program that ACHD has employed, one or the other. But it looks as though there is sufficient space for a sidewalk to go in. Did you catch that? Just making sure I'm seeing what I think I'm seeing. Essentially parcel C is the property line aligns to the point where the sidewalk that is being proposed as a condition would be at least physically possible to extend to the west.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, yeah, that is something that could potentially happen in the future based on other redevelopment and or other programs like you just stated.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Mooney?
question for the applicant, Mr. Johnson. So you're obviously aware of the Starview improvements coming out with the development agreement with the city.
Yeah.
So lots of changes to Starview going up the hill there with no facilities, pedestrian or bike on the, in this case, on the south side of Starview, as we're
Correct.
looking at this depiction. But the north side will have pedestrian and bike facilities that end just east of your parcels. Is that your understanding?
That's what I do understand.
And so your alternative to sidewalks, you said there'll never be sidewalk to the north. That's kind of that's a bold statement, never. But so my question is,
In the foreseeable future.
yeah, exactly. But as we've talked about many times up here, we build these things piece by piece. And as you noted that South Mill Point Lane, those street trees down below are really attractive. And that's kind of the look we're trying to get to eventually. My question for you is, if the commission decided to understand your argument regarding attached versus detached sidewalk on
Correct.
your parcel, would you be willing to put attached sidewalks off-site on the other side of the street to connect this new Starview development, i.e. pedestrian facilities on the north side, and put that sidewalk into the north if we're able to do that?
What you're asking me to do is build sidewalks on property I don't own.
Right.
And I think that is, I don't feel like I should get into the business of trying to condemn my neighbor's land, please. So let's just say, no, I don't want to have anything to do with putting a sidewalk
Got
on
it.
my neighbor's property.
Got it. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Moore?
So Jesse, I think this is a question for you. The development to the west, or the house to the west, that looks pretty recent. It seems like that would have required a sidewalk. How did it not? Or is it deceptively shown on the satellite image?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, I believe with that property, since they were not asking for a subdivision or any of those other improvements, and they would just had a lot that had already been divided at a different point in time, that is why that requirement for sidewalk was not placed there.
Gotcha. Mr. Chair.
Please.
So on the northern side of Starview, do you know if those are detached or attached planned sidewalks, the sidewalks that we're talking about?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, in yellow on the screen, that is the approximate location of the sidewalk, and that is planned as attached sidewalk.
And Mr. Chair, one more.
Please.
So if that's attached, and then I think a little bit further up, and I'm looking at our packet page 71, there's a little cut of Vortex Drive that's showing what appears to be an attached sidewalk. And then on Toluca Way, there's both sides are attached sidewalks. So it seems that there's a fair amount of attached sidewalks kind of around the area where sidewalks are provided. So why the detached requirement, I suppose, at this particular location?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, In general, detached sidewalk is something that we do want to see throughout the city to provide for pedestrian safety and comfort. I know that in some of the more topographically challenging areas that we do allow for attached sidewalk, especially if we're trying to keep the roads more narrow.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Mooney?
I'm going to go back to my question about attached on the north side of Starview to continue that Starview project. And I guess a question for staff or the city attorney. This wouldn't be an offsite improvement on someone else's property. This would be in the ACHD right away. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, I believe that there is some room in ACHD right of way, but in order to make improvements in that right of way, you'd have to coordinate with ACHD.
Correct. So, but we have that opportunity to condition the applicant to build a detached or an attached sidewalk on the north side if he agreed to that.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, I believe that the applicant can agree to those conditions, but requiring offsite improvements is, something that's a little more difficult.
John, you think you were just getting out of the location of the attached sidewalk?
Mr. Chair,
Correct.
what I'm getting at is that the applicant's point about pedestrian facilities on Starview on the south side, as we're looking at that's going to be a long time off. That'll be a gap in the network for many years based on that property to the west just recently being developed, and it's not going to have probably another application to come before us to put a sidewalk in later. Whereas now we've got a new project with a new pedestrian facility going in this year, and we could extend that yellow line if the applicant agreed to it and we were comfortable with an offsite improvement.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you for clarifying. Jesse, I'm going to take a break from the sidewalk discussion just for a minute. I want to circle back to the subdivision design itself, density and hillside requirements. There's some correspondence in our packet and some concerns about, additional density if this is to rezone, right? And how many properties could be, or how many structures could be built on the property, that sort of thing. From your project report and then your intro tonight, it sounds like at this point, the plan is to subdivide this into 2 parcels, build 2 homes. Is that your understanding?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, that is correct. It's for 2-lot subdivision.
Okay, great. And then any additional structures, if they were to be proposed on these parcels in the future, what would that process look like?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, any structure that is in the hillside would have to go through an additional Category 2 review to make sure that the land can support that development. Additionally, any single-family home would have to meet all setbacks and height requirements of the zone. Anything else would go through further process.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Okay. Any other questions? Good. Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay. Thanks, Jesse. All right. We'll go ahead then open up this item for any public testimony. If you're here in person and want to testify, podium is free. Come on up. And if you're online, go ahead and raise your hand. And we'll start with people in person first.
A positive person or a negative person?
You can do all of the above. The floor is yours for the next 3 minutes.
I would like to thank the commissioners for their time and their commitment to work on these kind of things and make our community a better place. I'm David Binion. I live at 2212 Ridge Point Way on the Mesa. I've lived on the Mesa since 1972. I've built 2 homes there. One of them is probably less than 300 feet, a little 400 feet from this spot. So I know that spot pretty well. I I've been active in the Mesa community as a resident in the infrastructure development and the improvements that have been made there over the years. I decided when I saw the notice of a hearing that I would come and at least express my thoughts on this. And I'll try to make them really brief, and I'll read them so I don't get off course too far. Boise has limited foothill space that is suitable for appropriate development. The foothill properties are highly desirable with their views and the surrounding open space that comes with it. Therefore, it's I think it's extremely important, and maybe sometimes we haven't done our best job of getting the best densities we can in them. And that piece of property sit there. I don't know if you folks know the history, but Dallas Harris built the first house, owned it totally independent of this subdivision, and Gene Armstrong bought it. I believe that the community is wise to encourage higher density, single-family residential development that is achieved within the foothill and the city guidelines. That's very important. From my observation and history on the Mesa, the rezone of the subject Starview property and the splitting of the 1 acre lot into 2 single residential homes, similar to the adjacent Mesa residential areas, will be a positive action and better use of our foothill properties. In addition to that, there's good precedence to this that has happened in recent years. The Rudy Nelson properties, as you come up Stark Crest, was a large lot that was split into 3 lots. There's 2 existing homes there and a lot still for sale. The old Paul Weiss water tank was split into 3 lots, smaller lots, and there are lots that are much smaller than what's being talked about here. So I certainly the precedents for that. So I would recommend the Planning and Zoning Commission approve this rezone and the consequential splitting of the lots. And I'd like to thank you for your time and my opportunity. Does the commission have any questions of me?
Mr. Benyon, thank you for your time. No questions for you. We appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, looks like we had a few folks with their hands up online. So we'll go that direction here. Good there, staff? Okay.
Mr. Chair, Jet.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can, yes. We can start with your name and
Yes.
address for the record, please.
I'm Jet Marash, and my family has lived at 2530 South Mill Point Lane since the early 1980s. I'm opposed to changing 3121 East Starview from A1 to R1C because it would allow up to 8 houses on a steep piece of land situated on the unstable clay soils and rubble field geology of the Mesa. And from what I'm hearing, it opens the door to those 8 houses. There's no assurance that it would only be 1 additional house. Once the present owner sells it, the next owner could proceed with a higher density development. And a subdivision of up to 8 houses is untenable and incompatible with the surrounding A1 properties here on the edge of the Mesa. 3121 East Starview drains down to my family's and a neighbor's adjacent properties. It would devalue our property values and potentially cause physical harm to properties below. The slippery clay soils and outwash drainage, as well as the human infrastructure of the mesa, is already being overburdened by the development that's going on. The steep, highly erodible character of this area is apparent after last night's rain, as water streams down the middle and sides of Starview roadway, despite the new carefully engineered catchment basin built above. Starview is a dangerous road and was not designed for the heavy traffic that it's receiving. And even though infill is a good idea as far as the humans go, you have to think of where you're infilling at. And the mesa, I'm sure you know, is on these clay soils and rubble geology. And the sheer weight of the development that is going on, as well as the drainage issues, are not going to go away. We have to deal with what nature presents us with. So please be wise planners and retain the A1 zoning for this area. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next we'll hear from Scott Montgomery. Okay.
Yes, I am Scott Montgomery. My wife Ann and I own the property at 2500 South Mill Point Lane, Boise, Idaho, 83712. I sent in comments. My concern, of course, is that all the commissioners have had a chance to read and understand our strong opposition to changing from the A1 zoning to R1C. All the lots on this end of this zoning in the mesa are all A1 and are that way for a reason. This is absolutely a sandstone debris field. And they had to leave the properties open because of the instability of the soil. It's inappropriate to try to put too many properties in here, even if this applicant is honest in saying that he's going to keep this to just 2. It should be just 1, just like it was set up now. The entire properties on this corner of the mesa are all A1, and we don't want to be affected by our property values so that they can try to split this lot. I appreciate the time and would take questions if interested.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Montgomery. And looks like up next we have Matthias Marash.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can. Hello.
Hi, this is Matthias Marash. What Scott and Jet have said, I have already touched on a lot of the points. I'd also just like to bring up when this proposition is brought up as recommended for approval, it really doesn't set a good precedent. It makes it seem like this is just like a rubber stamp. Like, why are we here if it's just being approved? I guess I'd also just, the same point about how this is a single, it's just a classic trend we've seen many times before of a developer coming in, getting their foot in the door, then making changes that largely benefit them without really considering the benefit for the community. Yes, we do need more dense housing, but on the side of a hillside probably isn't the ideal spot for that. I guess that just brings up as well, why do we need there's no reason to trust a developer. I would like to give them the benefit of the doubt, but we've seen many examples where things get changed. Yes, there might not be 8 homes right now, but that certainly doesn't mean that couldn't be done down the road a few years. I guess I just ask, is it too much to make profit from building one house? Is it really necessary to build 2 houses? The Mesa is a unique place. There's changes and challenges in this neighborhood that maybe aren't there at all places, but having more densely packed housing on a hillside just does not make sense to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Marash, if you could give us your address for the record, please, before you depart. 2530
South Mill Point Lane. My family has lived there since the early 1980s.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Looks like that does it for the folks online. We'll go ahead and bring this back sorry, bring this back to the applicant for your rebuttal. Mr. Johnson, you'll come back up to the podium here. I'll give you 5 minutes for rebuttal.
Sure, I appreciate it. And this may be more for the benefit of the folks who are concerned about the hillside stability. As the commission's aware, we had extensive geotechnical work done in this application. In fact, my geotechnical engineer has done a lot of geotechnical work here. This parcel is suitable for 2 residential homes. And we checked that. It's been scientifically checked. There shouldn't be any risk or threat to the neighboring property owners. As far as the intention, this isn't a naked rezone request. This rezone request has been, in fact, submitted with the plat application to make this 2 lots. Our intention is apparent from the paperwork that we've submitted, and that's what we've done. And Commissioner Mooney, just I'm following up, and I'm concerned about this thought of placing a sidewalk across my neighbor's properties. Please, if I have to have a sidewalk, please do it on my side. I don't want to be putting sidewalks on my neighbor's properties. As you can see, I've got some tensions in this neighborhood as it is already. So thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. All right, we'll go ahead then and bring this back before the commission to render a decision. We got 3 items here with this application. So it's your all's pleasure if you want to take them all up at once. A little reminder that we are recommending on the subdivision, the plat. So that will go to city council. And then, of course, the other 2 are final on.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Moore.
I move that we approve CFH 2293 and recommend approval of CAR 2246 and SUB 2270 with all the terms and conditions in the staff report.
Okay, got a motion to approve. Do I hear a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a second from Commissioner Danley. Commissioner Moore, do you want to start us off with some discussion?
Sure.
Okay.
So I think I'll start with the rezone. So for the rezone, it's 1 acre. 8 units would be allowed in this zone per acre, but we have a proposal for 2. It's 1 unit above what would be allowed in the A1. And on top of that, if I'm looking at my packet page 78, so that's the site grading and drainage plan. Those houses are pushed pretty close to Starview. They're pushed about as close as you can get to Starview to that R1C zoning adjacent across the street. So it's really mitigated from, the rest of that A1 zoning. And it's really kind of, the development is really contained. I think the site plan has been very carefully thought about in that aspect to minimize development and kind of push that development more towards the road. For the sidewalks, I think Jesse's narrative about, on those more kind of steeper sites or sites with more challenges in terms of grading, having those attached sidewalks makes sense. This one slopes downwards and there, appears to be some space for a detached sidewalk. So it makes sense to get a detached sidewalk where we can. If this were perhaps across the street, maybe an attached sidewalk like they're putting in would make sense. I'm not in support of any off-site improvements. I think, this is kind of a good snapshot of getting sidewalks in, and I think it makes sense to require it here, but to require it elsewhere just doesn't feel, I don't have a very reasonable way to require that. And then just in the comment of rubber recommendations for approval being rubber stamps, I think, yeah, I wholeheartedly disagree with that comment. You know, we review all these applications, we take all the information in, and sometimes we do disagree with staff and modify conditions and things like that. And so I think it isn't a rubber stamp. I think this is made, you know, with a lot of consideration, and, you know, staff has presented us with arguments based on the comprehensive plan and the city code. And we've also reviewed this, gone through this presentation, asked questions for clarification in such a way that it's not a rubber stamp. So for all those reasons, I'm in support.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Moore.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Daly.
I will be in support of the motion, at least as it pertains to the hillside development permit and the rezone in particular. And then I'll get to the preliminary and final plat in just a second, but a few observations. Number one, no, we are not a rubber stamp. That's flat out offensive. This board, who volunteers for the city, takes time out of their weeks and family times to review hundreds and hundreds of pages of document, participate in the process, thinks very deeply and considerately of these issues. And so, no, that is a flat out falsehood. Let's be very direct about that. With respect to the applicant himself and this notion of, for a lack of a better term, sort of greedy, what have you, I don't get that from this applicant. Last week, we had a different issue, and I'll say that because I think that was the case. I think the applicant has expressed some concerns about their neighbors. I think some of them are viable. So I don't get that, but let's get into the details. The hillside development, geotech, they're experts. They have to fit, you know, all the checks in the boxes in order to move forward. I have confidence with that. Right across the street for the rezone, we have units that are less than the full acre, and looks like it could even be half acre or even less. So I don't have any problem with the rezone either. The issue that I'm on the fence about is the sidewalk. Normally, huge proponent of detached sidewalks and the trees. My concern is that we have a project that is being built by the district where this isn't exactly, we're not fitting, if that makes sense. And I could be sort of persuaded to go with an attached sidewalk when I normally wouldn't, because I can see why that would make sense. With regard to the street trees, I can also sort of understand that. Where I think that falls short is I can't imagine that the applicant's going to build 2 homes and not plant a few trees. And so if that's the case, then those views are going to be blocked as it is. So I'm on the fence about that, and I'm just kind of putting that out there. But for the other 2 particular applications, I will be at least in supportive of those.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Daly. Any other comments?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Mooney.
Yeah, the testimony from the public, you know, there's some concerns about inappropriate development based on the mesa geology. And I agree with the staff and the applicant that there's been an immense amount of geotechnical engineering done here. The applicant is at risk. He's spent time and money to have that assessment done. And it's unfortunate that the public doesn't understand that the applicant's not being greedy here by trying to put 2 lots on Starview Drive. He's making a good business decision, and he's doing all his due diligence. And I disagree with the public's comments about, is it necessary to build 2 houses there? So that's from the hillside perspective. Regarding Commissioner Danley's comments, my comments are clear that I think the immediate benefit to the city here would be to extend the attached sidewalk on the north part of Starview, not on those neighbors' parcels, but on ACHD's property, because that's what they're going to be doing anyway here shortly. So it is an offsite improvement, but it's an immediate pedestrian benefit to everyone on the mesa that's going to come up Starview and has worked really hard to get that project done, to have a bike lane and an immense amount of engineering to get from Warm Springs Avenue up onto the mesa. So that's my position. I guess Commissioner Danley's comments about attached versus detached on this parcel, I'm also agreeable with attached versus detached.
Okay, all right.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Blanchard.
Just real quick, I just wanted to chime in too, for everybody up there, that the A1 zone is what's called a holding zone until we come up with some other zoning for it, which the city intends that A1 be developed. We just haven't gotten around to putting zoning on that yet. So with what we have here proposed for us in the subdivision plat, the developer, were we to grant the R1C, would indeed give them him the right at 8 per acre. But I mean, what he's actually kind of generously submitted is closer to the R1A, which is only 2 units. So it's really pretty fair to everybody up there. Again, just because that A1 zone is a holding zone until we get around to putting the development zone on it.
Okay, thanks, Commissioner Blanchard. All right, looks like it's my turn. I will be in support of the motion. Mr. Johnson, I appreciate your presentation and thoughtfulness with the design. I agree. I think Commissioner Moore's summary of the project is on point. I have no problem at all with the zone, the rezone portion of this. That matches the zone across the street. The density aligns perfectly with the rest of the development up there, and the homes, with the exception, of course, of the few homes that are on the A1 lands. To that point, there are homes on both sides of this proposed project. So we're not building or subdividing and building 2 homes on its pristine, undeveloped portion of the city, right? There are homes on both sides of these proposed homes here. So therefore, I think that adds additional credence to that this land can support the 2 homes that are proposed here. To that point, too, the grading, hillside application, all of that checks out. Staff is supportive of all of that. And quite frankly, I'm not into the weeds on this one, but I think you'd be hard pressed to get more than 2 structures on these 2 parcels anyway, given the conditions out there with the grades and the hillside. Excuse me. So all good there. I would agree with all the comments regarding, responses back to the public testimony on these items. I think that this is infill development. It's responsible infill development. I think it fits within the context of where you're building. On the hot topic of the year, back on our sidewalks, I'm going to be I'm in support of the motion as written, and and we're on record last week on a similar project. We live in an era that detached sidewalks are what the city wants to see. With the detached sidewalks, you get street trees. Those street trees provide additional benefits beyond just being street trees, right? They help to retain our hillsides. They absorb stormwater. They provide shade. They combat urban heat island effect. The list goes on and on. We had an application last week where we talked about the gaps in the sidewalk system, right? So there was an era when in this city, the sidewalks were never built. And then there was an era in the city that sidewalks were attached and constructed. And now we're in an era when we're proposing all detached sidewalks with street trees. And as Commissioner Stead pointed out last week, eventually we're gonna get to a place where we have sidewalks everywhere. And maybe they're attached in some places, maybe they're detached in other places. But if we don't continue to build those sidewalks, we're never going to get to a network that's complete. And we're talking about infrastructure that will last 100 years, maybe even longer. So to that point, I am supportive of staff's assumption of the project, and I will be supporting the detached as proposed. So that's where I stand. The good news for Mr. Johnson, this has to go to City Council anyway because it's a subdivision. So you're welcome to have that discussion with City Council at a later date if you so choose. Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Danley.
If I can, I'm sorry, just real quick point. I don't think we explicitly stated this, and there were many members of the public who voiced a concern that I want to put this to bed here, which is that this notion that if we were to approve this tonight, that somehow the applicant can go in and build 8 units because it's in line with the zone, the maximum density of the zone. To clarify that, we have on our docket a preliminary and final plat recommendation, which clearly states in front of us that there are to be 2 homes if approved. So there will be no additional homes if approved. There will be only the 2 as suggested and applied for if approved by the city council. So I just want to make sure to state that.
Okay, great. Thanks, Commissioner Danley. Okay. If there's any other final comments, I'll go ahead and call the roll. Again, we have a motion to approve and to recommend approval of CFH 22-93, CAR 22-46, and SUB 22-70. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Schaefer,
Aye.
Blanchard,
Aye.
Moore,
Aye.
Danley,
Aye.
Mooney,
Aye.
all in favor, motion carries.
Thank you all. And with that, we will move on to our last item tonight, which is item number 5, CUP 22-69, Point Architects at 1791 South Wind Dancer Way. This is a general exception to apply the R1C zoning district standards to the entire subject property in order to add 3 detached accessory structures and a residential addition to an existing single-family home on 0.56 acres in an R1C and an R1 ADA zone. We're going to hear from staff first, Mr. Matt Dennis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. As you just stated, the item before you is a request for a general exception to apply the R1C zoning standards to the entire subject property on 0.56 acres located at 1791 South Wind Dancer Way in an R1C and R1 ADA zone. As you can see from the graphic, the majority of the subject property is zoned R1C with an approximate 30-foot wide strip of R1 ADA zone along the northeastern property line. The split zone parcel occurred from a property line adjustment that was approved in 2021, in which the land therein was quitclaimed from the northeastern neighbor to the owner of the subject property, but was never rezoned, resulting in the subject property being required to comply with both the R1C and R1 ADA dimensional standards. The general exception would allow for 2 of the 3 detached structures to be set back 5 feet from the northeastern interior side property line, as allowed within the R1C zone. Currently, the R1 ADA dimensional standards require a 10-foot interior side setback. Late correspondence received from a neighbor expressed concerns regarding the design of the project as summarized on your screen. Planning staff reviewed these concerns and maintained the original recommendation. In conclusion, the planning team recommends approval.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Next, we'll hear from the applicant.
Rich Childress, 5072 North Marsh Avenue, Garden City, 83714. The owner wanted to do these improvements to his property, and we couldn't quite get it to fit. So he approached his neighbor, made a deal to buy the property, hired a lawyer and a surveyor, took that on. Somehow, either nobody realized the zoning wouldn't stretch with the lot, or the neighbor property doesn't seem like it's a different zone when you're there. So this is sort of a cleanup step to that property transfer. To address the concerns from the public, we've been through a pretty rigorous HOA approval process, generated multiple renderings, and submitted that, and were approved by the HOA. As far as the height goes, our overall building heights are considerably lower than any of the existing houses or many of the existing houses, because we deliberately tried to hold them down and be considerate to the uphill neighbors. So they're simply just not tall. The neighbors are very concerned because they want their views. As a designer of the vertical, I'm confident that once they're built, their neighbors will see that their views are hardly impacted at all. But the concerns that the public brought up were addressed with the HOA approval. So they had their shot, and I don't know, we did a lot of things for those guys. So I feel it's been addressed.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Childress. We might have a few questions for you.
Okay.
Good. Okay. I don't think we have anyone from the Warm Springs Mason Neighborhood Association with us. So we'll go ahead and open this up to any questions to staff or the applicant.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Moore.
this might be outside of the scope of this, but it looks like there's 2 new driveways proposed. And since we just had that discussion earlier, do those comply with, the proposal complies with code?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, that the entry points of the right-of-way is a decision maintained by, created by ACHD. ACHD provided agency comments that approved the plan as proposed.
Mr. Chair.
Please.
And so similar to the last application that, and I think the biggest one that I'm thinking about is probably that southern driveway. That's not an issue in the city's eyes to have that second curb cut.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, that's correct.
Oh.
I had the same sort of line of questioning going there, Matt. Isn't it within, so correct me if I'm wrong, please. If memory serves, code dictates that your driveway can only be like 35 feet wide where it connects at the street frontage. So with both of these driveways, are they somewhere in that, they must be within that range? I mean, they're breaking it into 2, of course, but we're still within that 35 maximum.
Mr. Chair, commissioners, that's correct. The dimensional maximum, the maximum width of a driveway is 35 feet within the front setback.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Correction, 30 feet.
30 feet. Okay. Well done, staff. Well done. What's that? Yeah. All right. Any other questions? No? Okay. All right, we'll go ahead. I don't think we have, maybe you have somebody online. We'll go ahead and open this up for any public testimony. So we have one person online. I'm not sure. Ms. Jurison, I guess she's never, if you'd like to testify, Ms. Jurison, go ahead and raise your hand and we will make you active to testify. Okay, doesn't look like it. All right, so we'll go ahead and close public testimony. Mr. Childress, this is your opportunity as the applicant for rebuttal. You can certainly yield that time if you'd like. Okay, thumbs up on that. So we're going to yield our rebuttal time. We'll go ahead and bring this item back before the commission to render a decision.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Danley.
I make a motion that item number 5, CUP 22-69, a general exception to apply to the R1C at 1791 South Wind Dancer Way be approved with the terms and conditions in the staff report.
Second.
Okay, great. Got a motion to approve by Commissioner Danley with a second by Commissioner Blanchard. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair,
please.
Despite the fact that there's a hideous Seahawk logo on the inside of the garage, which is offensive, I see no issue with this application at all and see no reason why it shouldn't be approved. So that's the motion, and I'll be supportive of my own motion. See, it's hideous.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Blanchard.
Yeah, just real quick. This is, I mean, basically an administrative cleanup is what this is, where you've got several different zoning codes on top, or zoning designations on top of one property. And as I'm looking at the proposed zoning map, the city's already anticipated that and is proposing R1C on that in the zoning code update. So we're just cleaning it up ahead of time before it would have gotten done anyways.
Okay. Yeah, I'll be in support of the motion. Mr. Childress, thank you for your patience tonight and waiting. And to be honest with you, we didn't have really any testimony against this item, so I'm not quite sure why we had to hear it in the first place. But needless to say, thank you very much for joining us in your presentation. And to the general public that might be still listening, if anything, Commissioner Danley's comments prove that we pay attention to every detail of our packets. So,
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Mooney.
I'd like to thank the staff and Matt. The graphics on this staff report are great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, we'll go ahead and call the roll. Again, CUP 22-69, motion to approve by Commissioner Danley with a second by Commissioner Blanchard.
Schaefer,
Aye.
Blanchard,
Aye.
Moore,
Aye.
Hanley.
Aye.
Mooney,
Aye.
all in favor, motion carries.
Okay. Thank you all. We are adjourned.